Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here with more Gnosis Insights. Let's talk about a very popular and interesting subject matter known as remote viewing, or remote viewing, modern sorcery. Well, that term has been used, remote viewing, for many years now, and this is something that the ignoramuses and pseudo-intellectuals have decided to coin as a process of using psychic abilities, basically, to gain information. And of course, couldn't possibly use the metaphysical term, especially when practiced by government murderers in a false and criminal system, otherwise known as the military. The incompetent boobs that haven't won a war since 1776, of course, are now going to venture into this and going to come to some sort of conclusion of how to use this. And they're going to use the best and brightest of their gooby, idiot, buffoonish military personnel to do that with. Followed by some delusional and misunderstanding public whores that they pay money to, like SRI, that work for people that will murder them ultimately. There's never been a military weapon that has been invented that hasn't been used on the population that invented it or paid for it. But I guess this doesn't get through to so many people. So, but the reason I say that, it's very important to understand where information comes from, because this is what the spin on it is. This gives it credibility and also gives it that hazy fog and that misinterpretation that someone who is a believer in some sort of religion will add into their particular belief systems. This happened dramatically when it comes to Rodin, who invented the Rodin coil and wrote a whole book on it, with the last chapter being about the Baha'i religion that he was a member of. Well, here again, maybe he would have done more with his coil if he was more involved with that instead of a religious belief system, which limits his capability in life. So the whole idea is, what is remote viewing? How good is it and what? Now, there's a mountain of information done by people who are so-called credible. These are parapsychologists, people who are so-called trained. I'm not sure that that's a plus or a minus. I mean, they spell nice. Their grammar is good. But do they really have any insights? And of course, the minute you don't have the grasp of the English language in this particular writing form, you're considered ignorant, and the information that you write is terrible, which is a bad way of looking at things, although understandable, because in this day and age, you should be able to put out something fairly decent. But these people that get published by publishers and who do all their editing and everything else for them, or they spend the time to do it themselves, or have buddies and pals do it for them, is certainly a big plus, where the average dude doesn't. So when we get into remote viewing, that's nothing more than modern sorcery, meaning the fact that sorcery has used divination and astral projection and bilocation ever since the invention of magic and its many uses. This is nothing more than a bunch of eggheads getting involved in something that was traditionally done by others. And of course, since basically sorcerers and occult scientists in general are people that are odd, different, and don't fit in that well, it's difficult to get those people involved in any kind of research, even though it's really never overly been tried. I do remember reading in some remote viewing book that at one time they started bringing in people such as this, and the government murderers there objected to the fact of bringing in magical people. They weren't like me. They could murder a guy and laugh, blow a kid's head off, and not think any about it. So the point is that there were all sorts of problems with these particular people that didn't like these brought in. And I think what's happened because of that is that they've made remote viewing into the sterile, ineffective, and pretty bad technology that it is. There really is very little when you look into remote viewing that anybody has claimed to have done to any great extent. My research keeps to go in this, and I will update this as I find more discoveries out there. But when you read books, and kind of what has me foaming at this point is the Angela Thompson Smith book, Seer, Seers, and her 30 years and counting personal guidebook and into her entire life for the last 30 years, giving a diary type explanation of what was doing. An easy way to write a book as well is putting in what happened that day. It's not very cohesive, and there are lots of missing information because of this style writing. But it's a fascinating book of going into, what happens in the day-to-day trenches of remote viewing and people involved in alternative areas in general. And, the problem with all these areas, and I will go into that in other things, but that in other audios, but the bottom line is all remote viewing is that. It's astral projection, taking your consciousness to another place and then activating it to see what's there. This has been done through scrying, dowsing with pendulums, crystal balls, crystals in general. This has been done for thousands of years, and you get your impressions of that. And after reading her book in particular, boy, she needs to go back to school with some sorcerers. So the whole idea is that that's all remote viewing is. They're getting impressions, they're doing things. When you really get down to it, and I watched McGonagall on, I believe it was Nightline, do his little demonstration, which was pretty pathetic. And of course, the problem is they even have unprofessional people doing these things, going to a bridge or something, which I think is what he did before. It's not a very good object to test someone on. It should be much more specific, and maybe a building or a park, something that is irrefutably identified once you make a drawing of something out of it. So he kind of made these markings that look like a bridge, but it could have been a tall building or anything else. But my impression of that is that it was a pretty poor demonstration by the finest remote viewer ever, as he states himself, and so does Russell Targ and others. Well, you could have fooled me. Certainly haven't seen that demonstrations. His books are pretty mediocre and poor. His book about the future didn't give any pertinent information, etc. So another government shill that is sent out there to try and find psychics and get them going in the marketplace so they can be used in the future and build a whole community without spending a dime. That $17 trillion that missing ain't going to go into the hard-working average guy's pocket. So the whole idea is that they want a bunch of bozos to work for the government for free. And apparently remote viewers and most of these other people seem to be the people that want to donate their time. They don't want to be paid for anything. Of course, the reason why they're not paid is because they don't really produce anything, because that's what happens to commodities that are worth a lot, but people don't pay for it. Well, they're not worth a lot. That's why people don't pay for it. That's what it really comes down to. So that's all it is. There's nothing special or mysterious about it. What they've come up with is different protocols based in their buffoonish understanding of this world through their military or ignoramus higher education that they have gone through. So they've done it in a way that they can understand, and people give them credibility because they are a government-employed people, and for some reason the government doesn't. Well, the bottom line, it wasn't even a governmental people or military people that ultimately put these systems together. They were nothing more than the pawns. The people who put these systems together were the civilians, and it seems to be in contention of who put together the remote viewing manual that became popular and now it can be gotten anywhere as the CIA manual. Central Idiots Association. So these kind of people had nothing to do with it and produced pretty mediocre results when you really go back into it. There's a few stunning cases and a whole bunch more that are just pathetic. But But really, it was Ingo Swann. It was Russell Targ, and there are others, particularly the researcher, parapsychologist, who I always forget his name, out of UCLA, who wrote The Entity, or researched that and then wrote the movie, who really put this together. They got this all information together, and everybody's claiming they did it, but apparently it was all very similar, and I think everybody contributed to it. They did it. It had absolutely nothing to do with any governmental people. These were people that were paid, and the only people that do invest in this area is that has the money, apparently. Even though I'm sure a lot more would if they understood the value of certain empowerments that are out there, that invest in these things. And these whores jump on these government contracts, even though they're selling their soul to the devil, and none of their research will ever be made public, or Spartan amounts of it, tiny bits. The research that Dr. Flanagan did, Patrick Flanagan, the famous genius-type guy, and his waters and neurophone, etc., did massive amount of research with dolphins in the 1970s, and none of that has been declassified up to this day. So here we go again. Who benefited from that? Well, a very disreputable and corrupt group of people did. The military, that tends to never use anything. You know, the same people that buy hammers for $10,000 and produce faulty equipment and all the other things they're doing. And it just goes on and on with these kind of things, and supporting a rotting, terrible system who's then you're going to be beholden to and can't talk. I mean, because of these things, none of the pertinent information was released. When Uri Geller was being disgraced in the media, Russell Targ and SRI had photographic evidence of him doing everything he said he did and more, and they couldn't release it. So screw you. You're just another cog in the wheel, all the people they used. There's even talk that Pat Price, one of the top remote viewers under Russell Targ, was murdered by the government because he was unstable. Where I think the fact is that he was a Scientologist, and he was giving information to his Scientologist buddies. And they were highly upset at this and decided to stop it in a very definite way. So we don't know about that, but he apparently even knew it himself, being a psychic that he was going to die, and went and talked to friends and relatives telling him bye-bye. So all of this needs to be understood of what this is, and I'm very tired of a bunch of hucksters coming out and really social deviants, which is what all government really is, and all their employees, coming out and stealing stuff, renaming it, and then, of course, giving it to the worst possible people on the planet, which is any police or military organization. So we need to fully understand. So there's nothing mysterious about it. What is interesting about remote viewing is because it's the modern, sociably acceptable tradition of sorcery, there is reams and reams of information. But everybody in the remote viewing program, I think even people that cleaned up the floors and dumped out the waste paper baskets in one of their little huts, has written a book on remote viewing and is giving courses, and they're all quite wealthy from it. I don't think there's a single government remote viewer or anybody connected to it that isn't doing quite well and hasn't made a bunch of money from that. They're all giving courses, they've all written books, they've all set up associations, and they're all living very high on the proverbial hog. So this all needs to be fully understood of what's going on. So they created this industry and have been pumping books and information and courses into it for over 30 years now. A lot of stuff was done even in the 70s, and things were started and books were written, and this goes up to even modern day where we continue. But, it is the same old cast to a large degree. There are some new books out there by unknowns who probably much better than the same old mishmash you get from all these people that change my remote viewing with a finger in the eye, remote viewing with your a bucket on your head. You know, they all do the same thing, and then they change little things of it, so you buy their book or take their courses. And then they give you all sorts of information that is virtually impossible to verify and even hasn't. You know, this book by Angela Thompson Smith is really, after reading it and thinking about it, what a sad, sad state remote viewing is in up to this day, and what horrible documented failures she put in. The entire book is all about failure and not doing anything and not getting anything and not making any money. But I'll get more into that and other things. But that's all remote viewing is. And astral projection is no different. And of course, there's remote viewing and remote influence, which is using your energy to influence a person, place, or thing, otherwise known as spellcasting. So you send energy out, psychic work. What is new? But, unfortunately, psychic has been trashed down to a word that means absolutely nothing. It actually means con, means gypsy fortune teller. It means the psychic network on TV, which has been discredited. Even though I'm sure and have met some of those telephone TV psychics from the 80s or 90s, whatever that was. And some of them were very credible, very honest, and very accurate people. So that's really not true either, to discredit people because it's that. It's another thing to discredit the entire area of sorcery, which doesn't deserve it. Otherwise, better explained, as I've always used, is the term occult sciences. It covers all of this because it is a science and has been going on for thousands of years and has been documented, and we know it works. And like everything in life, oh no, it don't work all the time for everything. No. Difficult. It's very hard to get the lotto numbers. That's right. Certainly remote viewers have never done that. So we get into all these things, and what does it all mean? And it's very important not to allow this terminology. But when you're doing research, there really is nothing new out there. There's nobody who's come out in any area of the occult sciences with anything new except the Guild. IGOS has always been the leader since the day that I started the organization and put everything together. First one to translate all the grimoires, first one to have courses in all different traditions, on and on and on. And I published The Average Joe, who was an active magician getting results, instead of some college professor or some goofball guy that could write well, but basically had no or not much of a background. Most writers are just that. They're writers. They're not practitioners. I got practitioners. So it was very, very interesting to put all that together. But nobody else is doing anything in these fields. There's nothing new out there, unless there's a lot of others who've copied what I've done, of course, in a very poor manner. But there's nothing new out there. People are writing the same old books, doing the same old things on the same old topics, and there's nothing new about it. They're not producing occult-empowered tools. They're not doing nothing. It's a bunch of junk presented by the same people, rehashing the same thing. So there's really nothing happening, and there's nothing new. And this carries into also the consciousness radionic machine technology, where there's absolutely nothing new on the market and hasn't been for over 10 years now. There's nothing new. There's no breakthroughs. The people making things are generally doing a pretty poor job. While some of the manufacturing is good and looks clean, the actual instrumentation is horrendously backwards, and they have no idea what energies they're using. So here we go again with there's no conception of what's going on and no breakthroughs. So what are you supposed to do? I mean, there's always random interesting books here and there that you can pick up, whether they're old or new. And it's amazing the massive amount of literature in this entire area there is. There must be tens of thousands of books written from the 1950s to present time on this entire area. From basic psychic statistics to alternative healing to radionics to witchcraft to everything in between there are tens of thousands of books. And there's really nothing new coming out and probably never will of any value because the people writing these things haven't reached the state of gnosis. They're very low-level people. So they're not coming out with anything new. And of course, that goes with these government military boobahs, these ignorant fools spouting their ridiculous nonsense, which also goes for the worthless parapsychologists who do absolutely nothing. And of course, most of them will be gone in the next 5 to 10 years. And of course, who's going to pick up? Probably nobody. They're the last, and they've done nothing to produce anything. They have no business. They have minimal writings. They have nothing to carry on. They haven't started things in their own institutes or anything else. Of course, I haven't gotten the word out. I mean, how do you become a parapsychologist if you want to? Who the hell knows? So these are all the things that's their legacy, a legacy of nothing. And they think they're going to leave some photographic evidence like Jeffrey Mishlove, and this somehow is going to carry on with somebody. Who's going to pick up your channel, Jeffrey? I doubt anybody will. And in 20 years after your death, you'll be nothing but a dream. So the whole idea is all this will be forgotten and swept under the carpet because there's never been a cohesive institute. But there is, because all these remote viewers, being the government whores they are, all start institutes, suck money from anybody they can, and of course keep promoting things with their government retirement paychecks and all the other payoffs that they get from Mr. Uncle Sam that we pay for. Certainly they have done nothing in any other fields to justify that, even though they know everything, right? So, all of this turns out to be null. It's zero, it's void, it's empty. Bong bong, it's an echo in a giant stadium where there's nobody in there. So that's the reality of what's going on. But don't be fooled by this nonsense of what remote viewing is. But there is a massive amount of literature written by these people, which is certainly interesting. And in the coming year, I'm going to be going through this mountain of literature and see if really there's anything there. But it is a tangled, ugly, woven, stinky blanket that's going to have to be gone through careful by a bunch of frauds, controlled and dominated people. And this goes on and on from all these people who are doing all sorts of secret projects that they can't talk about to fill their own pockets and to empower devils. So, a lot of these people think spiritual. They think there's something more. Well, it seems to me there's a lot of karma to be paid by the parapsychologists for empowering demon murderers, and the comeuppance for many are happening soon. Until next time, everyone.